Right, Ava, thank you so much for coming here to ITS. So it's a little bit bittersweet though, because this is probably the last time we'll see you since you're now graduated and you're going to Pennsylvania University. Congratulations. That's like a really good university. And so it's good to sit down with you and just talk to you about kind of your journey since you have participated with ITS for many years now. And so it's really nice to see someone who's been part of many of the things that we're part of, like finally, graduate and leave. But yeah, let's just go straight into it. So you were part of our Youth Advisory Committee from 2023 onwards, and then you were also president of the HKMUN around the same time too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Let's just talk about what happened before that, because those are leadership positions. And so I wanted to ask you, were you involved in any other kind of clubs or had any leadership roles before that?
Yeah, of course. So I think Model United Nations, or I guess at ITSYC, I perceived as sort of separate things at the time, actually. So I think before I applied to the YIC, I had a lot of experience in the realm of sustainability, or I was very invested into that type of, I guess, work at the time. So I was part of my school's environmental club for a little bit called WAMBO, and that was what sort of sparked my interest in, I guess, learning more about the environment and also the ways we can interact with it to, I guess, achieve a more sustainable world. At the same time, I also had a lot of friends that actually participated in the Youth Ambassador program, I think maybe YAP, and I helped pitch one of their programs when they got to sort of like the finalist or like the speaking stage.
Oh, you were part of the team there.
So she was presenting a project and she invited me to help her present that project at the final stage, and I was more than happy to just help her present it there as I had awareness of what her work was at the time. And that was when I first, I guess, had awareness of ITS. There were also a few, I think, members that were part of previous YIC, so youth advisory committees that I knew at the time. So for example, Cadence, if you remember her.
Yeah, she was our first president actually of the very first one.
And I worked with her in an organization called ISIA, like the Interschool Social Issues Association. And that was also where I got more into learning about youth advocacy and also the power of youth in making a change in terms of areas like sustainability and just social issues in general. So that was what brought me to ITS-YIC. And as for the Hong Kong Model United Nations, that was more of a public speaking / politics related endeavor I had at the time. I started Model United Nations when I was in year 7, and so I continued that all throughout high school and gradually took on more roles. And then sort of that was when I connected with Danny. So after ITS-YIC and then participating in HKMUN, I realized that he was a very helpful sort of mentor and also, I guess, advocate who's also very passionate about youth advocacy and social issues. And so I thought it would be a great idea to kind of connect those two together.
Okay, yeah. So you mentioned, youth advocacy and youth empowerment as well. When you were in your school club Wambo.
Yeah.
What
so
does
it's sort of like Wambo in Chinese or Cantonese is Wambo, and that means like recycle, I guess, like or like to. Yeah, I would say the general translation is recycle. And so that's what we've always known it. It's just part of our school student council structure. And it was a club that I joined when I would say like a bit younger, when I was in island school. And that sort of was what sparked my interest.
Oh, were you in island school for the whole time?
Yeah, I've been in island school since year 7 up till year 13. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So part of why we're doing this is because we want to encourage more youth to be, more active, to take on leadership roles, or not even necessarily being a leader, but being part of clubs like that are doing like youth advocacy, youth empowerment, helping the environment, or sometimes just other social issues. So was that club the first time that you were in a student kind of like social club kind of, helping people in the environment type thing?
Yeah, of course.
Where did you start is what I want to know.
I think my first experience, I guess, being part of a school group or a school advocacy organization was sort of in year 7 and year 8 when I was part of our school's culture committee. So I guess how our school council works is that there are lots of branches into different subcommittees. So we had the culture committee, we had the environmental committee, we had a social action committee, and there was lots of variety, or I guess lots of different groups that you could participate in, and they were more more niche, so you could find your interest and what types of issues you wanted to advocate for. For me, it started with culture, and then I started to kind of make my way through different groups to see what I was most interested in. And honestly, even though I would say my interests haven't been like spread across all those different groups now, it really helps me find my way into, I guess, looking and discovering at what I was most passionate about. So eventually that ended up being my school's social action group. So even though I started in culture and then moved on to environment and then later more centralized more broadly on social issues and our social issues group in our school, it really helped me get a sense of what I was passionate about and what I felt like my purpose was within my school environment. So that was really helpful.
So why was that one what you landed on as your passion? How come the other ones, can you try and explain why the other ones weren't as interesting to you as maybe the one that you landed on
Yeah, of course. For me, I think it was gradually throughout high school that I realized I had a very, I guess, interest in particular social issues, and I thought, I guess, social action was a group that would help me best achieve that. So, for example, throughout my my entire high school life, obviously we started with ITS-YC, and there was sort of an area where I focused a lot on sustainability, and then that sort of led me to broader, I guess, social issues. So, for example, within social action, which is the group in our school, there's also a subgroup called Girls Rising, and what we basically did there was advocate for equity and equality within our school environment, partner with external partners like Luna, for example, to introduce period products in our school environment, give talks to primary school students and secondary school students, just to introduce various issues like women in STEM, self-defense, etc. So, for example, women's rights was a very big part of, I guess, my later advocacy in high school as I discovered what I was more passionate about. And that sort of just branched into, I think, other extracurriculars I did beyond high school as well. So I mentioned women's rights. I also did a few, I think for a few months, I also did research at the Legislative Council. And that was researching on, I guess, women's different sexual offense policies surrounding women and girls as well. And I think kind of that whole entire journey while I was exploring different social issues was sort of what got me focused on, for example, women's rights, an issue that I really care about. So that was sort of why I landed on that group, and it's given me a lot of opportunities to also advocate for other causes I care about.
Oh, you were really busy. That's a lot of stuff. Did you ever struggle balancing that with your schoolwork and just, friends and family and other things?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. I think, it's not the first time I've heard that question as well. I think that's a very, I guess, valid concern for people who are balancing, I guess, extracurriculars simultaneously with also school life and also family. I think what came with that was that I really had to look at my schedule and I guess look at what opportunity costs there would be. So for example, if I had to focus on a work project, that might mean spending less time with my family and friends, or that might mean dedicating less time to my school endeavors or studies and something like that. So I really had to make sure that I would get my priorities straight and sort of see what I needed to focus on what periods of my life, and also make sure that I had sort of not an equal, but a relative and proportionate time commitment to each of these things. Yeah.
So you had to cut out the stuff that you maybe wanted
exactly.
to do but didn't have the time.
Or for example,
kind of the mental space, right? All right. So I want to talk about the YAC, because I remember that you were here in this very room with the other committee members. And I think you were the president of that year?
I think it was
the second part.
Yeah,
I think there was
yeah.
two that year.
Yeah,
right?
I think so. There were two different, two different areas of the time. I think I was part of the committee, and then I helped out, I think, with some secretary work at the time as well. But it was, if I remember correctly, it was Natalie and Hannah who were presidents, and then Quinton was the secretary at that time, and then the rest of us were also just here as committee helping out. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and I think you did the event at Island School as well. What did you learn? What kind of things did you learn during that time in the YAC that maybe helped you later on, or?
Yeah, of course. I think the YAC is a committee that's, it's entirely made out of high school students, and we all come from different schools. And I think it was one of my first times working externally with a group of people who were, I guess, all from different backgrounds, or so you'd say, or different school environments. And we didn't know each other, or just had a very little understanding of each other before we worked together. So collaboration was definitely one key thing. I learned to interact and meet and get to know people and get to work really well with people who I'd never known before. And we formed like a pretty close bond between some of the members and I, and we still keep in touch to this
that's
day.
really good.
So for example, Hannah and I, we're still very close, and we still, I guess, interact and meet each other across a variety of events. And so it was a really nice working experience. I think also because we had the opportunity to liaise with a lot of different stakeholders during our organization of the two key events. So for example, obviously you have the school partners, but we also invited a lot of NGOs. And I guess youth advocacy groups also to present at one of the fairs that we had. We also had some speakers and different keynote opening and closing speeches as well. So it really was a very diverse and wide variety of speakers and audiences that we had tried to reach out and target. And I think seeing the events come to fruition was definitely a really rewarding experience. So event organizing was also one of the skills that I managed to hone during my time at ITS.
Had you been involved in events before, like organizing events, running events?
Yeah, so maybe I'd done a few Model United Nations conferences by that time, so organized and participated in those, and maybe also a few school events. But then I think the really large scale events and outside of school events, that was one of my first times, yeah.
Oh, okay. What were the challenges with doing the YAC, and what would you have done, like now that you have hindsight, what would you have done differently, you know, as advice for people who might be coming into YAC? Like, what should they look out for? Yeah,
of course. So I think looking back, some of the challenges, I think we were also a pretty big team and we were split across different roles. Obviously, my understanding was also that everyone was also very busy and committed outside that time period. So obviously we had to sort of find times and like periods where we'd all be free and all come together and all discuss ideas. And those meetings became a really good focal point for us to come back to. What I would say is, I think learning how to work with people who have different schedules while making sure everyone's also very on top of their deadlines. Obviously, you still have different roles, and the president has their position, and secretary has a position, and everyone has sort of, I guess, they have to sort of fulfill sort of their respective job requirements, and it can be sometimes difficult to keep track of. Also, there are just some things you can't really control. For example, if a speaker you've reached out to suddenly, you know, isn't able to come, or they have like a conflicting commitment that makes it so you have to alter the event schedule and timeline. I think those sort of unexpected things can come up, and what I've learned most is to kind of adapt and balance when those sort of things happen. And I guess one word of advice I would give to YAC members that are coming in is to just come in with an open mind and also be very unafraid to reach out to people who you might not even like be very close with for speakers or opportunities, because you never know you know, what their response might be, and it's always worth a try to reach out.
How many people did you have to reach out to before you got people who said
I think
yes?
at the time, like the whole committee collectively, we sort of reached out to all our connections and contacts to find youth groups who would come to present at the fair. So I think for every person, it was around like 10 to 20 youth groups like we had to reach out to and see if they would be available to come.
What was your like success rate, like, percentage-wise?
I think it really depended on each person. Some of us had networks to, I guess, organizations that were based in their schools, so they could just talk to seniors or juniors or friends even to get them to come in. And some of us were just connected to these organizations ourselves, so we had to try and see if there were other people that would be interested to come. I don't remember like roughly what percent or like, I guess, success rate it was, but I remember at one of the fairs that we held at Canadian International School that year, there must have been about like around 30 youth NGOs that were here, which honestly to us was pretty good, because that was all the space we had for at the time, but also because each of these groups that came in were really passionate and dedicated to, I guess, promoting their cause and also getting to know everyone there.
So what would you have done differently? Now that you have hindsight, what do you think you should have done differently? What could have been improved on?
Yeah.
You know, looking back at your own participation, what do you think?
Yeah, that's very fair. I think what I might have tried to do was to maybe keep the engagement more consistent throughout the year. Obviously, because we have our two flagship events, we focus a lot of time and energy and dedicate ourselves to making those events the best they can be, and obviously the biggest they can be and just more successful can be, the better. But I think throughout the year, we could have kept up with a bit more engagement, maybe on even our social media handles or even offline engagement, collaborating with more groups, just to make sure. I think the Youth Advisory Council is a group that's pretty known throughout the youth advocacy network, and making sure that we can sustain those connections, I guess, throughout the school academic year, or even during the summer holidays, not just in those specific two event periods.
So you mean engagement with the public?
broader public, youth NGOs. Like I think whether that's targeting a very niche audience, like I guess whether that's connecting with other NGOs, or I guess promoting the Youth Advisory Council more to the public, so that engagement is better with those two events. So that engagement is better.
We're adapting. We're gonna roll with it.
So that engagement is better with those two events. I think like that would be great. Yeah.
All right, great. We knew that was gonna happen. But yeah. Anyway. Well, let's talk about HKMUN, because that's obviously such a huge event, and we are, as ITS, we're the sponsors of that event. So we've been there and we've seen what you guys have done, and it just looks like it's so much organization goes into it, like booking the venue, like getting speakers, preparing all the materials, getting all the merch, and the coordination as well on the day has to be very precise. So what is that like? Can you talk, as president, how long were you president for? How many years?
So it was basically sort of a progression. I was head of personnel in 2023, and then I moved on to head of finance in 2024, and then 2025. I think was when I served as Secretary General. So it was sort of, there were obviously like Secretary Generals while I was serving in 2023 and 2024 as well. But then this year, HKMUN 2026 was when I first stepped into my role as, I guess, President or Secretary General of HKMUN.
So what's running that like, as Secretary General?
Of course. I think honestly, by the time after 3 years in HKMUN and also the year before I served as chair for one of the committees, Security Council, I'd already become very familiar, or I guess really experienced, I would say, as to how HKMUN is run and organized and managed. And so I think it was because of that experience that gave me more of that confidence to step into that position, and also to make sure that the conference was run, I guess, learning from previous iterations as well, the best that it could be, like given the experience and everything that I had. I think HKMUN definitely was one of the most rewarding experiences of my entire high school career. Yeah, it was like a really long experience, but it was also a very fruitful and rewarding one. It gave me the confidence to kind of lead and work with a team of also extremely dedicated and like really talented people. It sort of gave me the awareness of how much work and time commitment is needed to put in when you're organizing a large-scale event. We basically sort of select the EB. Actually, at around this time, I just did a round of executive board applications just yesterday for our next EB. And basically, sort of from July onwards, it's a whole continuous process to build up to the conference. That's in March. So obviously, it's a lot of, it's time commitment, but it's also very continuous and regular. So I guess it sort of is a testament to the fact that these sort of events don't just happen overnight, but it's also sort of long period and effort of collective effort of a lot of people that are willing to put their time in and effort in to dedicate to an event like this. So definitely it's not just me, it was everyone else behind the scenes working as well.
How has doing the HKMUN changed you? Like being part of all these boards and being Secretary General? Yeah,
so basically how it works is that when you apply for a position on next year's executive board, you're actually not involved in the interview process at all, because obviously they want to be fair and impartial, and you can't, I guess, interview other prospective applicants when you yourself are a prospective applicant. So this year is actually my first year conducting the interviews, because I was continuously part of the board from 2023 onwards. But having been part of other executive boards in Hong Kong as well for model UNs, like I sort of had an awareness of how the process would sort of look like. And it's been extremely exciting, I guess, talking to people who are very interested and invested in the future of HKMUN, such that, they're taking the time to write like long application responses. They're taking the time to come and speak to us in the interviews and letting us know what their thoughts are about, what HKMUN's legacy might be, or sort of what plans they would have in store for the conference next year. And so it's a very exciting process, and it's also been one that's very inspiring as well to see the next leader of MUN. Like I guess kids come forward and take.
So what do you guys look for in the applications? Like which ones separate like the good applications from the not so good ones?
Yeah, of course. So I guess primarily we're always looking for applicants that have had, I guess, a vested interest in HKMUN. So maybe they've attended the conference in the past, maybe they've been an admin, a photographer, a delegate, or maybe they've chaired, maybe they've been executive board members of other MUNs in the past. So that sort of experience and passion in MUN we always look for, like initially in an applicant. Also, I think the written responses are always, I guess, also quite important, because that's sort of an area where they can sort of express concerns, or I guess their vision for the conference. So maybe we'll ask them questions about, what do you think the potential conference theme could be? What do you think were some areas of improvement that could have been implemented based off of previous HKMUNs? What new ideas do you have in store? How would you work well as a team? So I guess these sort of questions are always placed so we can get to know them more as a person, an applicant, and also a prospective member of the EB. And finally, obviously, we have the interview stage, and that's sort of more like a personality check, I would say. Obviously, we want to know that there's someone that might be able to work effectively in a team. We always want to see if they're able to answer impromptu questions. We always want to see how they react when really challenging and hard questions are posed to them. Obviously, I think that variety of factors combined everything else is really what we're looking for.
Can you give an example of what's like a challenging question that's meant to really test the person?
Yeah.
Kind of catch them off guard.
Of course. So for example, all of the, I guess, more challenging questions are always the less generic ones. So we always look at the application and see whether we can come up with very specific questions that are tailored to the application, and see if there's any flaws or potential holes that we can find, and then ask them about it and see what their response is. So for example, if a delegate, if an applicant was to propose maybe a prospective venue that they see the conference, that the conference would be like suited for the next iteration, we'd ask them, oh, do you think that location might be a challenge given that it's not in a very central area, or do you think they'll have enough committee rooms, or what would the teacher supervisor's reaction be if they were placed in an environment that was different from last year? So that might be an example of a question. Another example might be that they might try to invite more sponsors or seek more financial assistance from, I guess, different groups in Hong Kong or even abroad, just to generate, I guess, more revenue and also make sure that HKMUN is very financially sustainable in the long run. But a question we might pose to them might be, oh, are the delegates' experience not going to be as optimal as it was before, because they might think that the conference has too much advertising or it detracts away from the delegate experience. So to see if they can come up with ways to sort of mitigate that, and to know that they've sort of thought deep about how a conference might actually be run. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you're a really good speaker, by the way. You really articulate your thoughts really well. Were you always like that, or is this something you cultivated?
No, definitely not at all. And thank you so much for the compliment. I think I had a lot of practice and experience, having done MUN from a very, I guess, since the beginning of my secondary school life. Like, I will admit, I think my English was probably very bad when I entered an international school, given that I had studied at a local school before, and so I mainly spoke Cantonese and Mandarin in school, and very, very little English actually, until I progressed into an international school. And there was definitely a lot of practice, interacting with my peers on a day-to-day basis, talking with my teachers, and also doing a lot of public speaking, debate, MUN, and I think the World Scholars Cup, things like that really helps me hone, I guess, my public speaking skills and my confidence.
Wow. I would never have guessed that that's what happened. So
yeah.
Well, how was the transition like then? In year 7, you said you went to international school. You must have struggled a little bit, right?
I guess
communication hard.
It was a little bit of, I guess, a culture shock, because I was exposed to a lot of people from different backgrounds, whereas I think coming from my local school background, almost everyone was Cantonese, and so it was a very different environment, but it was also an environment that challenged me and really encouraged me to grow as an individual. And so I'm very grateful for that opportunity. I feel like without that, I may have been a different person, and who knows what might have happened. But definitely, I think the chance to make the most out of that opportunity that was given to me, and also I think being very willing and open to explore a lot of different things. So trying out MUN, for example, that was not something that was, I guess, a concept in my primary school, or I had really no idea what Model United Nations was. But having, I guess, taking that first step to try that out and actually really liking it and continuing with that was definitely a pivotal moment in my, I guess, secondary school life.
What kind of advice would you give for younger students who are just entering high school and they really kind of want to be like what you're doing, like being Secretary General of this and President of that? Like, what would you say would be the steps they should take at the very beginning?
Yeah,
and also
course.
It's like it's also advice for parents as well, who kind of want to help their kids and they want to show them kind of what they should be doing.
Yeah.
What would that be?
That's very fair. I think the key thing to keep in mind when you're entering high school or secondary school for that matter is not to impose too many expectations on yourself. That might seem kind of counterintuitive, but I feel like a lot of the motivation that I have for to continue with my pursuits is because I'm either really passionate about them. I feel like they can help me learn and grow as an individual, and that motivation is more intrinsic than extrinsic. So for example, I guess the same advice might apply to parents as well. If, for example, your kids are not as passionate about an activity, I feel like there's not as much need to really encourage them to do it unless that's something that they themselves are really passionate about. And I think the the ability to give them the freedom to explore and learn and to make mistakes and to try again at many, many, many different things is what will really help you discover what you actually really like. I wouldn't say like to encourage them to try like only one specific thing that they like, but perhaps encourage them to just step beyond. And if that's something that they truly enjoy doing, then they'll discover that on their own. And also maybe like, accidentally stumble upon to opportunities and things that they might have not realized otherwise. So always have, I guess, the courage to try and learn and be open to new ideas is what I would say to anyone.
Were you kind of given free rein then to try a bunch of stuff?
I think my parents were always very open or okay with me doing lots of different extracurriculars. I know some parents might have the perception that you should focus on your academics or that should be your number one priority, because I think that's a very fair thing to say also, that academics should be your priority. And I think it was sort of an agreement I reached with my parents that as long as I showed that I was able to sort of maintain that academic commitment and standard, and to know that my first priority, of course, is always a student. Obviously, other things I'd love to do as well, but to study, that would always be one of my top priorities, and to keep that in mind and to balance that with my commitments, Did
you have to negotiate with them like that?
I think it was always something that I knew that I had to manage on my own, and they gave me a lot of support to be able to do that in that way, and they were very supportive of me trying and doing different extracurriculars. I think that support network and also the ability to sort of be able to pursue different things, for example, was something that I've always been grateful for, that my family's given.
Are your parents lawyers by any chance?
No, they actually both work in the healthcare industry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay, right.
So my mom's a nurse and my dad also works in the same hospital.
Because it sounds like you're like arguing your point. As long as I focus on my studies and academics and I prioritize, can I do this?
That's very fair.
Yeah, I was gonna say like
bit
lawyers
of
or
negotiation.
some kind of like business people.
Yeah.
All right. Well, what would you say was the hardest point in your journey in high school? Like doing all of these clubs and things.
Yeah.
What was like the lowest point that you had to overcome?
Yeah, of course. I think one of the most challenging things I've experienced was when I first entered the IBDP in the last 2 years of, I think, secondary school life. Mostly because I knew entering into my junior or like year 12 year of high school, obviously the academic commitment is a little bit more. The IB is a pretty rigorous and challenging program, and I knew that I would have to dedicate more time to that and maybe less so to activities or extracurriculars that I was really passionate about. And I also at the same time balancing college applications to different, I guess, areas of the world. So for example, the UK and the US, they have really different college application systems, and also I applied to a few schools locally as well. So that was another system that I had to deal with. I think that part of my life, maybe around the last term of year 12, so term 3 of year 12, where I was doing my predicted grade exams, doing extracurriculars, and also sort of thinking ahead about college applications and how that would look like for me over the course of the summer. Like that was pretty much the most, I guess, workload or most heavy or intense period of time that I've experienced. But I would say that the way that I sort of got over that was sort of to make sure that, I guess, to reassure myself that I would pass eventually, and also to sort of maintain that sort of constant commitment to the things that I was doing and not try and give that up for the sake of something else, for example. Obviously, that's just easier said than done, and it was really challenging to maintain all of those things at once, and there were definitely times where I had to sacrifice one thing for another because of like a really intense commitment. For example, my exams were coming up and I had to study for those, and that was pretty important. So lessening my involvement in ECAs was definitely something I had to do at the time, but knowing when to sort of step back and to step back in again was a balance that I sort of had to learn and practice definitely over the course of the IB. Yeah.
What was your proudest moment in the past, like 10-ish years?
I think it was maybe finishing IB, and also like definitely
the curse of IB.
Definitely the curse of finishing IB, stepping out of that like final exam. That definitely was a moment where I was like, wow, can't believe that my high school journey is now over. Like that's basically everything, and it's finished. But also I think it was opening my university results. I suppose that's a very like basic thing, or that happens to everybody as well. But I think a lot of my high school life, to be honest, I'd been wanting to go study abroad for a while, and that was like a goal I was sort of working towards. So to have the opportunity and to be able to receive like a few offers from schools that I really wanted to go to was something that made me really excited about what my future would be, or I guess going to a different country would look like. So for example, I've never been to Europe. I've only been to the States like once before, actually. So because we normally travel with an Asia and stuff like that. And so I was really looking forward to the prospect or ability to, I guess, look beyond and see what else the world has to offer. So super excited for that and to see, what that's going to bring me.
Nice. Yeah, you're going to uni. More exams are coming.
Yeah,
it's not
that's
over.
true.
It's
That's
not
definitely
over.
true. Yeah.
What are you going to study? What's your degree?
Yeah, so I'm planning to study philosophy, politics, and economics, so PPE, at the
PPE.
University of Pennsylvania.